Detective Sarah Mills rubbed her tired eyes, staring at the stack of case files on her desk. Another sleepless night at the precinct, but this time was different. The Henderson case wasn't letting her rest. It had started 3 weeks ago when elderly Mrs. Henderson reported seeing a woman standing in the window of the abandoned Watson house across the street. Every night at exactly 9 p.m., she had said, her voice trembling. She just stands there, staring at my house. The Watson house had been empty for 5 years, ever since the tragic accident that claimed the lives of Thomas and Mary Watson. Their daughter, Emma, had sold the property and moved away, unable to bear living there after losing her parents. At first, Sarah had dismissed it as the imagination of a lonely widow. But then other neighbors started reporting similar sightings. Mr. Parker, the accountant next door, captured a blurry photo on his phone. The figure was indistinct, but unmistakably feminine, wearing what appeared to be a white dress. Sarah had searched the house twice. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no evidence anyone had been inside. The electricity was disconnected, and thick dust covered everything. Yet, the sightings continued. Tonight was different. Sarah sat in her unmarked car, watching the Watson house as the clock approached 9 p.m. The street was quiet, streetlights casting long shadows. Her partner, Detective Mike Rodriguez, was positioned at the back of the house. 8:59 p.m. Sarah checked her watch, then looked up at the second-floor window. Her heart nearly stopped. There she was, a woman in white, perfectly still, staring across at Mrs. Henderson's house. Sarah grabbed her radio. "Mike, subject is in position. Move in quietly." "Copy that," came the crackling response. Sarah exited her car silently, drawing her weapon. As she approached the front door, she heard Mike's footsteps around back. The door was locked, just as they'd left it earlier. She inserted the key they'd obtained from the real estate agency. The door creaked open. Sarah winced at the sound, but the figure in the window didn't move. She climbed the stairs carefully, avoiding the spots she knew would creak. Mike's flashlight beam appeared at the top of the back stairs. They converged on the room together. Sarah threw open the door, weapon raised. "Police. Don't move." The room was empty. "What the?" Mike swept his flashlight around the room. She was just here. Sarah rushed to the window. From outside, the figure was still visible. "Mike, look." They both stared at the impossible sight. The woman was clearly visible from the street, but the room was empty. Sarah reached out to touch the window and froze. "It's a projection," she whispered, fingers tracing a nearly invisible film on the glass. "High-tech transparent screen material." Mike examined the corner of the room, finding a small projector disguised as part of the molding. But why? Who would go to all this trouble? Sarah was already pulling out her phone, scrolling through the case files. "The insurance policy," she said. "Thomas and Mary Watson's life insurance policy. It was worth $2 million. But that was paid out years ago, wasn't it? To their daughter, Emma. But look at this." Sarah showed him the file. The policy had a clause. If their deaths were ruled suspicious instead of accidental within 7 years, the insurance company wouldn't have to pay. Mike's eyes widened. The 7 years are almost up. Exactly. Someone's trying to create a ghost story. Get people talking. Make the insurance company investigate the deaths again before the deadline. But who would? Mike started. "Someone who knew they weren't accidents," Sarah finished. "Someone who was afraid the truth would come out eventually and wanted to control when and how it happened." The next day, Sarah sat across from James Parker, the accountant next door. The same James Parker who had taken the blurry photo. The same James Parker who, according to records she'd pulled, had been Mary Watson's business partner. The company was failing, Sarah said quietly. Mary was going to have it audited. She would have discovered the money you'd been embezzling. So you tampered with their car's brakes. Parker's face remained stoic, but his hands trembled. You can't prove any of that. Maybe not the original crime, but we have you on breaking and entering, vandalism, and attempting to defraud an insurance company. The technology you used for the projection? It was purchased with your credit card. Parker's shoulders slumped. I thought, if I could get the insurance company to investigate, they'd discover the truth themselves. The guilt. I couldn't live with it anymore. Sarah nodded to the uniformed officers waiting outside. As they led Parker away, she looked back at the Watson house. The window was empty now, its secrets finally revealed. Mrs. Henderson appeared on her porch across the street. Is it over? She asked. Will she be back? Sarah smiled gently. No, Mrs. Henderson. The woman in the window won't be back. But thanks to her, we finally found justice for the Watsons. She looked up at the window one last time before walking away. Sometimes, she reflected, the most haunting mysteries aren't about ghosts at all, but the very human darkness that creates them.